So this Sunday, Gaudete Sunday, this Sunday we talk about joy, and I wanted to take a second and see how y'all were doing. And I had a question. Marcia McPhee says that joy is not about being happy. Joy is about this sense of well-being, even in moments when that seems to be on the surface, not what is happening. So joy, I think, sometimes is not a feeling as much as it is a state of mind. But I wonder about what is bringing you joy this week, this last week. What brought you joy, or in this last season of life, what brought you joy? And so I want you, if you're comfortable, to turn to your neighbor for a few minutes, a couple minutes, and just talk about what has brought you joy in the last season of your life. You can decide if that's a year, a week, a day, a month, a quarter, Q2, Q3, whatever, Q4, however that works for you. So, what is bringing you joy right this second? I want to tell y'all, sorry, I didn't mean to make Marilyn jump. I want to say one thing that brings me joy is the din in this room. The smiles that you can hear on people's faces, the sharing, and so that's part of what brings me joy, and how I see joy is even in the midst of hard times and uncertainty and a ton of rain and dark. There's still community and relationship that can hold us and bind us through times, hard, easy, bumpy, smooth, all those kinds of times. I want to tell you three things that brought me joy recently. One is a friend of mine is going through cancer treatment, have been trying to get into a cancer study, and got a call this week. And so they're going to go see if they can get in it over this next week. So that's, even though this is a super hard moment, this super hard time in their life, there's this opportunity. I'm going to tell a story about Thaddeus, my son, and now I didn't tell him I was going to do this, but yesterday, this thing brought me joy, but it's not going to sound very joyous, okay, just stay with me. Thaddeus is playing soccer on a team, and he's challenging himself to be, challenging himself to get better and better and better, and his team won the Founders Cup a few weeks ago, which is a state title tournament, so he's a champion, which is pretty exciting. But here's the thing, that's not the thing that brought me joy. The thing that brought me joy is his coach is about 24 and is very good at soccer, and plays with the boys, and he plays with them, and all the boys are 12 or 13, and he plays like he would play if he was playing against adults. He doesn't push them, he just goes around them because he's very fast. And we were playing indoor, we were inside, and he kicked the ball off the wall, and the ball hit Thaddeus right in the face. Square in the face. And he took a step back, and then he went back, and he started playing. And then I watched him, and I turned around, and he was crying. And coach stopped and said, "Hey, are you okay?" He goes, "Yes." And he kept playing, and he was crying, and he kept playing, and he was diving into tackles, and I opened the door, and I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Yes," crying. And then after 5 minutes or so, he just kept playing, and I don't want that to be like this toxic toughness, but there is something to be said for getting hit in the face and staying in it, metaphorically or physically. I also want to talk to you about my daughter, Sophia. Sophia is in the marching band at South High School, and yesterday was the Kaiser Festival of Lights Parade, which, as far as I can tell, is if you have a muscle car or a big truck, you just tape a bunch of lights to it, and then you rev your engine as you drive down River Road. That's what it seemed like, mostly. Or if you're a church, you get a flatbed trailer, and you jump up and down and sing songs on it, and then hand out tracts. This is my experience. And it was fine, mostly. It was 40 degrees. Was fine. So we're in Oregon. And unfortunately, South High was at the back, near the back of the parade. And about 2/3 of the way through the parade, it started raining. And by the time and my wife and I were standing down near the end of the parade, like maybe almost near a couple blocks from the end, and they were still in formation, and it was pouring rain. And they were in their brand new band uniforms. They were in these shoes that are not designed for walking in anywhere. And it was wet, and it was cold, and they were playing, and it sounded great, and she walked by, and we yelled at her, and she didn't look at us, which is what she did what she was supposed to do, but she did smile, and I could see it, right? And that smile in the midst of this pouring rain, and they had been at the school since 3:45. This was about 8:30 when we saw them. That's joy. It's one of the things that brings me joy is persistence in the midst of struggle, or in the midst of hard times. And I want to look at this Isaiah passage because I think it's, how we talk about, or you may have heard about reading things in context, reading the Bible in context and how important that is. And if you pull things out of context, you sometimes can miss the point. There's some really fantastic examples. I think this is one of them. In Isaiah 12, we hear this, "Surely God is my salvation. I will trust and I will not be afraid. The Lord is my strength and my might. He has become my salvation. Sing praises to the Lord, for he has done gloriously." Which sounds awesome, right? But if you've read the book of Isaiah, the first 10 chapters are decidedly not awesome. They are genocide. One commentator described it as a Holocaust. The Judean kingdom had been overtaken by the Assyrians. And Isaiah, the author of Isaiah, points this as a punishment by God for their lack of faith or their actions, and especially how they treated the least of these. Now, we can have a conversation about whether God does this, if this is a godly thing to do, is to punish you, or if it's suffering the consequences of your own actions and then blaming God. But that's not what we're going to talk about. So we have this 10 chapters of misery and destruction and exile and awful. We have this chapter 11, the wolf shall lie down with the lamb, and all this stuff. We've heard it before, right? And a little child shall lead them. And then we have chapter 12, this hymn of praise. But one of the things that I don't think see, as in the English translation, is in the Hebrew, it is written in the future tense. So this is not a reflection upon what happened. This is a prelude to what will happen. They are in the midst of misery and destruction and exile and fear, and they have joy and hope for the future, which is an interesting thing to think about in the time that we have, or any time in the world, right? Especially if you are not sitting on the top or near the top of the pecking order. So I think about this idea of future joy, our joy in the midst of hardship, this wellspring. I think in Isaiah it says, with joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation. And Jesus talks about the living water. I am the living water, right? What is this? And we have John the Baptizer. Before Jesus is announced as the Savior, before Jesus is announced to the world as the Son of God, John is baptizing people. John is saying, I baptize with water, but the one who comes after me will baptize in the Spirit. What should we do, teacher? Collect no more than the amount prescribed to you, for it says to tax collectors. Soldiers, what should we do? Do not extort money from anyone by threats of false accusation, and be satisfied with your wages. So it's interesting. It doesn't say don't collect taxes. It doesn't say don't be a soldier, or don't be a banker, or don't be a lawyer, or don't be but what you do with integrity, and take no more than what you need. Whoever has 2 coats must share with anyone who has none, and whoever has food must do likewise. Grace in Matthew says that if you have more than your share, you are taking someone else's, which is bold. We live in a world of abundance, but how do we decide what is enough? What is enough abundance for me? Because we can see scarcity in our world, in housing, in mental health, in grace and forgiveness and belonging. How do we share not only those physical things, but also those spiritual and emotional things? And here's the thing that I think really stinks about all of this, is that this happens in Advent. Grace in Matthew also says, there is not a war on Christmas, but there is a war on Advent. Waiting is not part of our vocabulary. And Advent, the season that we're in, is about waiting and uncertainty. And it's not a steady march to the manger. It's Elizabeth and Mary. It's all over the place. It's catastrophic. It's chaotic. It's up and down. It's not, as Diane's wonderful scene diorama, is that what it's called? It's not just adding stuff linearly. I'm sure your lives haven't been linear in every aspect, right? And then you climb the ladder and everything's fine, wonder, right? Like you had some ups and downs and rights and lefts and odd turns, right? This is the story of Advent. Marcia McPhee says, this impatience that we have cultivated for so long is killing us in the name of uncertainty because we have very little bandwidth for ambiguity and uncertainty. How many of us want to know the thing right now? Right? Me. What's the diagnosis? What's the prognosis? What's the fix? What can I do to fix it? I think this is fascinating as we've talked about making room at the table, having a place at the table, and then figuring out how much you have at the table. And we have looked for a person or a time period. So let me tell you a story, a secret. 4 years or 8 years is not going to fix all the systematic problems in our government. Shocker. So it's not going to be a candidate or a elected official or a party in a term that's going to fix however we fix it. I was thinking about this. A few of us read this book a few months ago called Troubling the Water by Ben McBride. And he talks about what he calls the cathedral problem. So a cathedral, even today, so there's a cathedral that's being built and has been being built in New York for 200 years. It's still being built. Cathedrals take time. If you're a fan of Ken Follett, Pillars of the Earth, fantastic book, but it takes time to get into. I'm just going to tell you that as a review. But once you get in it, you're in it. So, it's a trilogy. Don't worry about it. That's a different thing. This cathedral problem. Can you imagine the architect of a cathedral? The person who is the architect of the cathedral designed something that they know that not only they will never see, their kids will never see, their grandkids will probably never see, in the hope that at the end this project will be completed. But they don't have control of that project. They only have what is theirs for the time. So I think about the stonemasons and not just the overseers, but also the workers that are chiseling away at blocks, a block that they may never finish in their lifetime. And I think about the problems that we name in our society: homelessness, fear, antipathy, lack of empathy, lack of belonging, all these things. They didn't, as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day. These didn't happen overnight, and they will not be fixed overnight. And so I think about how do we have hope for the beginning, the opening day of the cathedral. Just like a few weeks ago, we had the reopening of Notre Dame that burned. Now, I will not say, I could go on a whole scree about, they raised $1 billion in a month to rebuild a church. When $1 billion in France maybe could have been used differently. But I might be Judas in that conversation. So how do we prepare so that someone else will be able to walk through the doors of that cathedral? Teddy Roosevelt's thing has been said to be quoted by Teddy Roosevelt. A wise man plants a seed of a tree that he will never sit under the shade of. So what are we doing right now that we're not going to see the end of? What are we doing right now that we are moving the project forward, knowing that that time that we have is not, it is finite, and it will not be enough to finish the work of the kingdom building, the work of the wolf lying down with the lion with the lamb, and a little child shall lead them. The story we have been, in the story of Isaiah, literally there are 3 different sections of Isaiah that were written over centuries apart. So there's the first section, which is like chapter 1 through 39, and then the next section, which goes to about 55, and that's 100 years or more after the writing of this. I want to read this one thing. Oh, it's just fascinating to me. Get my glasses out. The earliest version of this book was likely a written collection of Isaiah's prophecies, similar to archival compilations of prophecies from ancient Assyria. Now, Isaiah may have played a role in some of this collection, but these texts were scribal. They had scribal elaborations of his words rather than direct transcripts, which allows for open interpretation, which we know something about because that lion and the lamb and that child who leads them, who's that? Do you remember? Okay, friends, you can answer that question. Who is the child that leads them? Jesus, right. That's the answer to all the questions in church, by the way. There's an old story about a children's message. The pastor's talking about a fuzzy thing with a small brown furry animal with a big bushy tail. And the kid goes, that sounds like a squirrel, but I know the answer is Jesus. So Isaiah wasn't talking about Jesus, but we have decided that Isaiah is talking about Jesus. But Isaiah was talking about a new story. We have this story of power and control and coercion to bend. And Martin Luther King Jr. says, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. And we see that as a forceful bending. But what if it's not? What if it's different? It's not about bending people to your control or your ideas, but about awakening so that everyone has what they need. What does that look like? I don't know the answer to that question. I have some ideas, but they all fall flat when you start talking to people. Everybody's got a different story in a different way. Which brings me back to this joy. In the 60s, there was a song called Lift Every Voice and Sing, which became known as the Black National Anthem. And this song is sung as a future joy in the midst of the civil rights movement, where in Jim Crow laws and segregation, this recognition of the hurt and the pain and the challenge and the way it is and the way it was, and hope for the future, joy for the future. And I wonder how we sit in that. How can you share those stories that you shared earlier today about what is bringing you joy, and hold on to those moments and hold on to those relationships when everything else is falling apart? I think we can learn a lot from the Bible. And one of the things I think is most important is that waiting doesn't mean idling. And waiting doesn't mean doing nothing. But as we wait for God, as we wait for Christ, we do the work that has been given to us. Not too much, not too little, but we do the work. What then should we do? We should listen to God, listen to our neighbor, listen to one another, and let us make sure, as far as we are able, to live peaceably with everyone. May it be so, and amen.